The Great Silence had weighed upon humanity for centuries. The more they reached, the more they listened, the louder the void screamed its absence. The question lingered. Where were they? Were the stars barren, or was something out there watching, waiting in? The year 2146, Earth had become a beacon of progress. The fractured nations of old had united beneath the United Earth Directorate, UED, not out of peace, but out of necessity. War had pushed humanity to the brink too many times, and in their desperation to survive, they forged a world that had no choice but to prepare. Every major city had its fortifications, planetary defenses stood as sentinels in orbit, and humanity's militarized expansion into space had been swift and aggressive. They had learned the lessons of history. Those who were unprepared did not last. And so when the anomaly was first detected beyond the Kuiper Belt, there was no celebration, no diplomatic overtures, no naive declarations of peace. A fleet was coming. At first, the scientists hesitated, praying it was a mistake, some cosmic debris or an undiscovered stellar body. But the readings were undeniable. The objects moved with intent. They were massive biomechanical constructs unlike anything Earth had ever seen, and they were heading straight for the planet. In the control centers of orbital defense stations, alarms screamed. High-ranking officials whispered behind closed doors, their faces pale. Theories swirled. Maybe they were explorers. Maybe they were diplomats. Then came the transmission. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't an introduction. It was a statement. A voice, guttural and brimming with predatory amusement, echoed through every UED relay. The language was deciphered in seconds, not because it was complex, but because the words were simple. The intent was clear. We have found you at last. The harvest begins. The fleet did not slow as it reached the outer rim of the Sol system. No diplomatic envoys arrived. No emissaries sought to negotiate terms. And then, with horrifying precision, they attacked. The Xharran descended upon Earth like a biblical plague, their ships blotting out the skies, their grotesque organic hulls undulating with sickening vitality. Cities fell in hours, the first waves cutting through planetary defenses with an ease that defied comprehension. These were not conquerors. They were predators. They did not seek war. They sought food. Human screams became a chorus beneath the alien war cries, their victims dragged into towering harvesting spires where they were sealed in pulsating containment chambers, fresh livestock, awaiting processing. And yet, as the Xharran descended upon the planet in arrogance, something shifted, something unexpected. They thought Earth was weak. They thought humanity would cower. They did not understand what they had unleashed. For the first time in their existence, the Xharran were about to experience terror. The first battle was over before the last ship had even left Earth's orbit. The Xharran arrived not as conquerors, but as apex predators, and their efficiency was horrifying. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, their inhabitants harvested for a future they would never see. Earth's great technological advancements, its orbital defenses and its sprawling cities, none of it was enough. The Xharran's ships pierced through the atmosphere with ease, tearing through the heart of Earth's military strongholds like a knife through paper. But there was something they didn't account for: humanity's resistance. Captain Elias Voss had seen his share of battles. He had been part of the orbital shock troopers, Earth's elite military force, and had earned a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the cost. But this was different. These invaders were not like anything humanity had ever encountered. Their ships were alive, breathing, shifting like living organisms. Their weapons were not just designed to kill, they were designed to consume, to take everything. Voss was stationed at a private military facility in New Denver, a sprawling complex carved into the mountainous terrain. He had been content to leave behind the UED and their endless wars. Instead, he found himself working, private contracts, securing high-risk zones, escorting diplomats through unstable regions and handling the occasional uprising. But the Xharran were no uprising. They were a death sentence. When the attack began, there was no time to gather a team, no time to formulate a plan. Voss grabbed his gear and set out immediately. He had heard the reports. The harvesting ships, grotesque and towering, were already descending into the heart of New Denver. The reports weren't clear, only that the Xharran were taking people, snatching them from their homes, pulling them into the sky. As Voss raced toward the chaos, his mind churned with one thought. How do you fight something that hunts you like cattle? He reached the center of the city where the Xharran were already starting their work. The skies were darkened by their ships, black, organic, slick with a fluid that glistened in the failing sunlight. The streets were empty, save for the occasional flicker of terrified shadows darting into hiding. And then he saw them. The Kaigo. Xharran's ground forces were humanoid in shape but far from human. Their bodies were encased in hardened chitin, reflective and scarred with battle wear. Their limbs were elongated, their claws sharp and menacing, and their eyes glowed with a malevolent hunger. They didn't walk. They stalked, moving with unnerving precision, as if they were the hunters and the world was their prey. Voss moved through the ruins of the city with military precision, his senses sharp as ever. He couldn't allow the city to fall, not without a fight. He ducked into an alley, watching a group of civilians being rounded up by a squad of Xharran soldiers. His pulse quickened. He had to do something. But what? He had no intel, no clear strategy. Then he saw it. One of the Xharran soldiers, a hulking creature, was carrying a child. The small human's face was pale with fear, their tiny arms flailing against the alien's iron grip. That moment, that image, froze him in place. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a predator, and humanity was on the menu. Without thinking, Voss surged forward, his rifle raised. The sound of gunfire echoed in the narrow street as he struck down the first Xharran with a well-placed shot to the head. The creature collapsed in a heap, its body twitching, but the sound of the rifle's shot alerted the others. Two more turned toward him, their glowing eyes narrowing as they hissed in their guttural alien language. Voss's heart raced, but he didn't hesitate. He unloaded a barrage of rounds, and one of the Xharran fell. But there were more. There were always more. The battle had begun. The chaos spread like wildfire. New Denver was no longer a city. It was a battlefield, a staging ground for a conflict that had no rules, no honor, only survival. Humanity was unprepared for the kind of war they now faced, a war that was less about defeating an enemy and more about outlasting them. The Xharran came in waves, each attack more brutal than the last, pushing the limits of human endurance. Voss, with his military expertise, was a natural leader among the survivors. He gathered a ragtag group of civilians and fellow soldiers who had managed to escape the initial onslaught. Together they navigated the crumbling streets, avoiding Xharran patrols and striking at any opportunity. But every victory felt fleeting. For every Xharran they took down, another dozen would emerge from the shadows. Still, there was something in the air, something growing, a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The people of New Denver began to fight back with a desperation they had never known. Resistance fighters coordinated through underground networks, organizing sabotage missions and launching guerrilla attacks against the alien invaders. Voss found himself working alongside unlikely allies. A biochemist named Dr. Elise Kwan, a former UED scientist who had been conducting research into advanced biological warfare before the invasion. Her expertise would prove invaluable. As they set up their operations in a hidden bunker beneath the city, Elise began to piece together a horrifying reality. The Xharran weren't just after human bodies, they were after something far more sinister. According to intercepted data, the aliens harvested more than flesh. They harvested cognitive functions. The more intelligent the prey, the more delicious the meal. The very idea made Voss's blood run cold. They weren't just animals. They were something far worse, something predatory beyond anything humans had ever imagined. But that was only the beginning. As Voss worked with Elise and the others, they began to uncover the true scale of the Xharran's operation. The harvesting process wasn't just about sustenance, it was about evolution. By consuming the smartest creatures in the galaxy, the Xharran enhanced their own cognitive abilities, allowing them to become even more dangerous. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. It was fighting for its soul. If the Xharran succeeded, humanity would become nothing more than an extinct species, erased from the cosmos like so many others before them. But there was one thing the Xharran hadn't accounted for: human ingenuity. Despite their technological disadvantage, humanity had one weapon the Xharran could not anticipate: their ability to adapt. Voss had seen it firsthand, the way people banded together in the face of disaster, the way they fought for each other when the odds seemed impossible. Humanity's resilience had always been its greatest strength. Elise, with her background in biochemical engineering, had started experimenting with ways to turn the Xharran's biological superiority against them. She developed a prototype, a biological agent, an engineered strain of bacteria that could infiltrate the Xharran's digestive systems and attack their vital organs. It was dangerous, experimental, and completely untested, but it was their best shot. There was no time for a trial run. Elise and Voss made the decision to use it. They had to strike before the Xharran could reorganize and launch a full-scale planetary assault. Their plan was simple: hit them where it hurt. Voss and a small team of operatives would infiltrate the Xharran's central command hub, located in one of their massive harvesting stations. The goal was to plant the bioagent deep inside the station's processing core, unleashing it into the Xharran's supply chain and decimating their ability to feed and reproduce. But it wasn't going to be easy. The station was heavily guarded, and the Xharran had already begun adapting to human tactics, reinforcing their operations with bioengineered defenses. The mission was a suicide run. No one believed they would make it back alive, but Voss didn't care. They had no choice. They would either win or Earth would fall. The night before their mission, Voss couldn't sleep. His mind raced with the same questions that had been haunting him since the invasion began. Would it be enough? Could they truly turn the tide with nothing but a plan and a single weapon? He stood alone in the command room, staring at the flickering map of New Denver and the surrounding areas. The Xharran were relentless, closing in on all fronts. The city was on the brink of collapse, and Earth's last hope rested on the shoulders of a few desperate survivors. Elise entered the room, breaking the silence. She stood there for a moment, observing Voss, then spoke softly. "You're thinking about the future again, aren't you?" she asked. Voss didn't answer at first. He couldn't. The weight of the coming battle, the knowledge of what they were about to face, it was too much to put into words. "Listen," Elise continued, her voice steady. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there, but we've got one shot at this. One. And you can't let it haunt you." Voss turned to her, his eyes hard but tired. "I didn't think I'd be the one to lead this fight. I'm not a hero, I'm just a soldier. I was meant to protect, not save." Elise smiled faintly. "But you're the one who's here. That's all that matters now." Voss nodded, though the doubt lingered. The team assembled in the shadows of the city, the plan set in motion. They had everything ready: the bioagent, the infiltration suits, the tech to bypass the Xharran's security systems. The underground tunnels beneath the city would lead them to the station's outskirts. From there, they would move in, plant the agent, and escape. But as they moved forward, the weight of what they were doing hit them all. They were not just infiltrating an enemy base. They were stepping into the heart of the Xharran's world. There would be no mercy, no second chances. And when they finally reached the station, when they stood at the threshold of the harvesting hub, the reality of their mission became clear. The Xharran were not just predators. They were masters of their domain, and they were not about to let their prey escape unscathed. The station loomed before them, a monstrous structure that looked less like a building and more like the body of a gigantic, twisted insect. The outer hull was sleek and reflective, pulsating with an unsettling rhythm that seemed to echo with a life of its own. Voss and his team had reached it under the cover of darkness, using the city's labyrinthine tunnels to avoid detection. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the alien machinery that powered the Xharran's central hub. Elise led the way, her mind racing with the calculations she had run 1,000 times over. The bioagent was their last, chance. If they failed, humanity would be nothing more than another footnote in the long list of species consumed by the Xharran. She couldn't let that happen, not after everything they had sacrificed. The team moved in formation, their footsteps soft, but sure. Each member wore the same grim determination, but beneath the surface there was an unspoken fear. No one knew what awaited them inside. The station's interior was a complex maze of tubes, corridors, and darkened chambers. An organic and mechanical fusion that felt more alive than anything human hands had ever crafted. The air was thick with the stench of alien biology, a sickly sweet smell that made Voss's stomach churn. Every inch of the station seemed to pulse with the energy of the Xharran. They reached the core, a vast cavernous chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. At the center stood a massive processing array, the heart of the station. It was here that the Xharran carried out their harvesting rituals, where they converted their prey into sustenance, consuming not just the body but the very essence of the mind. Voss's pulse quickened as he surveyed the area. The station's defenses were formidable but not invincible. Elise's design had worked. They had bypassed most of the security measures. But they weren't alone. The Xharran had set up surveillance systems, and their biomechanical sentinels roamed the halls, alert for any signs of intrusion. "They know we're here," Voss whispered to Elise, his voice low but steady. His eyes scanned the darkened corners of the room. Every second felt like an eternity. "We don't have much time." Elise nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she checked the agent. It was contained in a small, unassuming vial, but inside was something far more deadly than any weapon Voss had ever encountered. The bioagent, once released, would spread rapidly through the station's circulatory system, attacking the Xharran's digestive processes. It wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to their survival. Voss motioned for the team to split up. They would need to plant the agent in several places throughout the core, ensuring it spread. They couldn't risk putting all their eggs in one basket. The Xharran would come for them soon enough. They had to be quick. As they moved deeper into the core, the first signs of danger became apparent. A sentinel, a towering, insectoid creature, rounded the corner. Its eyes gleamed with an intelligence that sent a shiver down Voss's spine. It was no mere guard. It was a predator, designed to seek out and eliminate threats. Voss raised his weapon, but Elise held up a hand. "Wait," she muttered, her voice tight. "It's not reacting to us. It's reacting to something else." The team froze. They followed Elise's gaze toward the far side of the chamber, where something was moving in the shadows. A Xharran warrior appeared, massive, covered in chitin, its body rippling with unnatural muscle. It didn't see them immediately, but its attention was focused on something in the distance. Its mandibles clicked as it sniffed the air, a low growl reverberating from deep within its chest. Then, with terrifying precision, it lunged toward the sentinel, its claws tearing into the creature's exoskeleton with brutal force. The sentinel fought back, but it was no match for the warrior's raw power. With a final sickening snap, the sentinel's head was torn from its body and the warrior dragged it into the shadows. The team stood in stunned silence, barely breathing. It was an opportunity they couldn't afford to waste. They had to move. But as they advanced toward their target, the holographic alarms blared to life, echoing through the chamber. The Xharran had detected them. They had been exposed. Voss's heart raced as the sound of clattering footsteps reverberated throughout the station. The Xharran were coming. There was no way out. They had no choice but to make their stand here, in the belly of the beast. Elise cursed under her breath, her eyes frantic as she worked to open the access panel to the core's central system. "I need 2 minutes," she shouted. "Keep them off me." Voss nodded, his mind calculating their next move. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." As the first wave of Xharran soldiers stormed the room, Voss and the others opened fire. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but the aliens didn't retreat. They fought with a savagery that mirrored the worst of humanity's wars, but their movements were far more alien. Too fluid, too predatory, too efficient. Voss's team was outnumbered, and the longer they fought, the more vulnerable they became. The Xharran had the advantage, both in strength and numbers. But then, something happened. As the Xharran pressed their assault, the first signs of the bioagent began to take effect. One of the soldiers collapsed, writhing in pain as its body rejected the bacteria. It let out a high-pitched screech as it convulsed, its limbs spasming uncontrollably. The others paused, confused by the sudden turn of events. That was all the opening Voss needed. He darted forward, his rifle blazing as he cleared a path toward Elise. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of alien blood, but Voss kept moving. The team fought with everything they had, using every trick, every strategy they had learned in their years of warfare. Finally, Elise activated the final sequence. The bioagent flooded the station's core, seeping into the walls, the floors, the very air. It was unstoppable now. The Xharran had been outsmarted. The predators had become the prey. But as the battle raged on, Voss knew this wasn't the end. The agent would take time to work, and the station would not go down without one last desperate counterattack. He turned to Elise, his voice grim. "We need to leave. Now." The escape from the core of the Xharran station was a frantic blur of movement, gunfire, and desperate survival. As the bioagent began to spread through the station's circulatory systems, the Xharran's response was immediate, but futile. They had no idea what they were dealing with, no understanding of the weapon that had been unleashed upon them. The predators were now scrambling to save their own lives, their fortress turning against them in real time. Voss, his heart hammering in his chest, kept his eyes focused on the tunnel ahead. The station was falling apart around them, shaking, under the pressure of the bioagent taking hold. The walls, once sleek and unyielding, now seemed to pulse with erratic, unstable rhythms, as if the very heart of the station was being torn apart. Alien soldiers fell one by one, their bodies rejecting the bacteria, their faces contorted in agony. But there was no time to celebrate. Voss knew the mission wasn't over, not until they were out of this hellhole. The Xharran might be retreating, but they were far from beaten, and the team had no idea how long it would take for the bioagent to fully incapacitate the entire station. "Elise, how much longer?" Voss shouted, his voice raw with urgency. She was ahead of him, her hands working rapidly on a portable console that was connected to the station's internal systems. "I'm patching into the control room. I can't stop the shutdown, but I can delay it long enough for us to get to the escape pods." Voss nodded grimly. There was no way they could stay hidden. The Xharran would send reinforcements once they realized what had happened. And even if they got to the escape pods, there was no guarantee the station's gravity wouldn't implode before they made it to safety. The team ran through the halls, their pace quickening as the tremors intensified. With every step, Voss felt the weight of the mission growing heavier. They had done it. They had planted the agent. But the cost of their actions was far from clear. They were out of time, and every second they spent here meant another life lost. Every decision they had made, every move they had taken, had led them to this one moment. But the aftermath wasn't something anyone was prepared for. As they neared the final stretch, the sound of more Xharran soldiers echoed down the corridor. They were coming. They had adapted quickly, pulling forces from the far reaches of the station. The Xharran were known for their ability to regroup, to strategize even in the face of catastrophe. Voss's mind raced. They had to move faster. They couldn't risk being trapped in the station when the core finally collapsed, and they had no idea how much time they had left. Was the bioagent working faster than anticipated, or was it already too late? "We need to move now," Voss barked, adrenaline surging through him. The team pushed forward with renewed urgency, but just as they reached the final airlock to the escape pods, the sound of alien footsteps grew louder. Voss turned to see the Xharran soldiers rounding the corner, their eyes burning with a fierce hatred. They had tracked the humans down to the escape route. "Elise!" Voss shouted again as the rest of the team took up defensive positions. She was at the airlock controls, fingers moving as fast as she could manage. "Almost there, just a few more seconds." Voss clenched his weapon, his knuckles white with tension. The rest of the team took up positions behind the walls, their weapons aimed at the entrance. The Xharran were relentless. their battle instincts honed for moments just like this. They would not let these humans escape. The airlock opened, the hiss of pressurized doors signifying that the escape pods were ready, but the Xharran were close. Too close. Voss could feel the heat of their bodies on the other side of the doorway. "Move!" Voss shouted, and the team stormed into the pods, a storm of bullets and alien screeches filling the air behind them. Elise followed close behind, the last to enter the pod. As the door sealed, she looked up at Voss with a pale face. "Did we do it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Voss didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window of the pod as the Xharran station began to collapse in on itself. The gravity field started to destabilize, the once perfect structure crumbling under the weight of the bioagent's damage. As they shot into space, the pod sensors picked up the station's final moments, a massive, brilliant explosion that lit up the dark expanse of space. Humanity had dealt a devastating blow. The Xharran were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. But at what cost? As the escape pods glided into the quiet void of space, Voss and his team knew they had won. The Xharran fleet had been severely crippled, their core operations disrupted. The predators, once unchallenged, had now tasted defeat at the hands of the humans they had underestimated, but the victory came at a cost. The city of New Denver lay in ruins and millions of lives had been lost. As Earth's defenders gathered their forces and prepared for the future, the true weight of the conflict began to sink in. The Xharran were not the only threat out there. The universe was vast, filled with dangers humanity had never dreamed of. And though they had defeated one predator, there were always others waiting, watching. The Earth had sent a message, a warning, a declaration that humanity was no longer prey. But what would come next? Would other, more dangerous threats rise to challenge humanity? Or would this victory be the beginning of something even greater? As the escape pods drifted into the safe zone, Voss turned to Elise, his expression hardening. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "But we'll be ready." The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had survived. Against all odds, they had taken on an overwhelming force and won. Now Earth would rebuild, but they would never forget the lesson they had learned. Never underestimate the prey. And so, as the survivors looked out at the stars, they realized the universe had just learned one irrefutable truth. Humanity was a death world. The Xharran fleet had fallen. The survivors, scarred and battered, had returned to Earth hailed as heroes. But the world they returned to was irrevocably changed. The invasion had shattered the illusion of safety, stripped humanity of its arrogance, and shown them a truth they had long ignored. They were not alone in the universe. The once vibrant cities, now in ruins, were beginning the painful process of rebuilding. The United Earth Directorate, no longer operating under the naive belief that Earth's defenses were invincible, had shifted their focus. Earth would rebuild, yes, but it would also prepare. Humanity's role in the galaxy had irrevocably shifted. The Xharran had been only the first. What other predators, what other species lurked in the vastness of space waiting to make their move? Voss sat alone in a dimly lit room, staring out at the stars from his small apartment in New Denver's remnants. His thoughts were a tangled mess of what had happened and what lay ahead. The victory had come at a great cost. Millions were gone. But the Xharran had learned the hard way that humanity, though not as advanced, was more than capable of survival. His mind wandered back to the final moments aboard the escape pod, the blast, the destruction, the eerie silence that followed. They had won, but what had they won? Would Earth ever truly be free of the lurking threat? Or was this merely a reprieve? His thoughts were interrupted by the soft chirp of his comm device. He reached for it, his fingers tapping the screen to open the message. The face on the screen was familiar, Dr. Elise Kwan, but it wasn't just her. It was the message she was sending. "Voss," her voice crackled through the static. "We've intercepted a transmission. It's encrypted, but we're certain it's from a Xharran warship. They're not the only ones who want Earth. We've learned that other species are aware of what happened and they're watching. You were right, Captain. The Xharran weren't the first, and they won't be the last. The transmission flickered out, leaving only a cold, uncomfortable silence. Voss set the comm device down. His heart sank as the weight of Elise's words settled in. The Xharran had only been the beginning. The first predator had been repelled, but the galaxy was a vast, unexplored frontier, and it was full of things far worse than what they had faced. He looked up, staring at the vastness of space through his window, his gaze fixed on a distant star, a single point of light in the darkness. It was a beacon to those who would come. Humanity had proven it could fight. It had proven that it could survive. But survival alone wasn't enough. The universe was watching. The predators had tasted humanity's resilience, and now they were coming for more. But Voss wasn't afraid. He couldn't be. The message was clear now, clearer than ever. Earth had fought back. And the next time, humanity would not just survive. They would fight to win. And when the next challenge arrived, humanity would be ready.